In the deserts of ancient Arabia, long before skyscrapers touched the skies of modern cities, there was Makkah, a city steeped in tribal tradition, pride, and idol worship. Tribal flags flew high, trade routes thrived, and the Kaaba stood in the center, surrounded by 360 idols. Power belonged to a few, and those few dictated the lives of many. Among them lived a man known not only for his honesty, but for his unmatched character, Muhammad ibn Abdullah. He was not a chief, not a poet, nor a warrior, but his truthfulness, his calm, and his integrity made him beloved to all. People called him Al-Amin, the trustworthy. They gave him their wealth, their disputes, and their secrets, knowing full well that this man would never deceive. Muhammad used to retreat off into a cave in the mountains, Cave Hira. There, in the stillness of the night, he would reflect. He would ponder on the state of mankind, the injustice, the falsehood, the arrogance. He refused to worship the idols his people so proudly honored. And then, one night, a night that would change history forever, the command of revelation arrived. An angel appeared, Jibreel, as, in the form that shook the mountain itself. And with a power unimaginable, he spoke. "Read?" Terrified, trembling, Muhammad replied, "I cannot read." The angel embraced him, firmly, 3 times. And then the verses were revealed. Revelation had begun. The seal of prophethood, long awaited by the world, had now been placed on the final messenger. The Qur'an had begun to descend, drop by drop, verse by verse, shaping a new era. He returned home shaken. His blessed wife, Khadījah, comforted him. She didn't question. She didn't doubt. She believed. And in her belief began the first spark of a revolution. Slowly, quietly at first, Muhammad began to preach the truth, that Allah is one, that idols are false, that men and women are equal in the eyes of their Creator, that the rich have a duty to the poor, that this world is temporary, and the next is eternal. These words, though gentle, shook the pillars of Qurayshi power. The elites of Makkah, Abū Lahab, Abu Jahl, and others, watched as his following grew. But it wasn't the number that worried them. It was who was following him. Slaves like Bilal ibn Rabah, women like Sumayya bint Kayat, young men like Ali ibn Abi Talib. These were people the Qurayshi elite saw as beneath them. And yet, through Islam, they stood shoulder to shoulder. The Quraysh responded with mockery first, then threats, then torture. They beat Bilal in the blazing sun, tying him to hot rocks, demanding that he denounce Allah. Yet all he said was, Ahad, Ahad, one, one. The oneness of Allah was more powerful to him than the pain of lashes. Sumayya and Yasser, were tortured in front of their own son. And she, Sumayya, became the first martyr in Islam. Her blood, spilled on the sands of Makkah, became a witness to her truth. Muhammad continued, with strength not from numbers, but from Allah. He met secretly, taught secretly. The house of Al-Arqam became the secret school of a silent revolution. One by one, the hearts of giants turned. Among them, Umar ibn al-Khattab, a man of fire, fury, and pride. He set out with a sword, intending to kill the Prophet. But by nightfall, he had recited Surah Taha, and Islam had thundered in victory in the home of Muhammad. Umar had come to destroy, but left changed. Forever. As Islam continued to rise, so did the fury of the Quraysh. The message had reached every corner of Makkah, and every house was now speaking about Muhammad. The leaders of Quraysh gathered with fear and frustration. They could no longer ignore him. They began to offer him power, money, kingship, and marriage to the most beautiful women of their tribe, all in exchange for one thing, that he stop calling to Tawheed. But the Prophet, with full conviction, responded, By Allah, if they were to place the sun in my right hand and the moon in my left hand, so that I abandon this message, I will never abandon it. His answer echoed through the ages, firm, fearless, and full of faith. And so, the Quraysh turned to attack those who followed him. The streets of Makkah turned into arenas of cruelty. Mus'ab ibn Ammar, once the most elegant young man in the city, wearing silk and perfume, became someone who dressed in rough clothes and walked humbly with the poor because of Islam. His mother disowned him, yet he remained steadfast. Young believers were dragged through the streets. Hot stones were placed on their chests, and yet La ilaha illallah stayed firm on their tongues. The Prophet watched his followers suffer, and his own heart burned with pain. But he taught them patience, he taught them prayer, and he taught them power through character. He climbed Mount Safa, calling his people openly, "O people of Makkah, if I told you an army was approaching behind this mountain, would you believe me?" They replied, "Yes, we have never heard you lie." He continued, "And I warn you of a severe punishment." Silence spread, but Abū Lahab, his own uncle, stepped up and cursed him. With that moment, Surah Al-Masad was revealed, Allah's eternal curse upon him and his wife. The Prophet was not just rejected. He was publicly insulted, attacked, and humiliated. But his mission never stopped. As the torture grew worse, some Muslims were given permission to migrate, first to Abyssinia, ruled by a just Christian king named Najashi, who listened to the message of Islam and granted them protection. But the majority remained. Quraysh decided to isolate the Muslims completely. They forced an economic and social boycott. Bani Hashim, the Prophet's tribe, was forced to live in a dry valley without food, trade, or visitors. Children cried out of hunger. Leaves were chewed to survive. This cruel boycott lasted for 3 years. And then came the year of sorrow. First, his beloved wife Khadījah, passed away, the one who stood by him from the first moment of revelation. Then his uncle Abu Talib died, his protector among Quraysh. The Prophet stood alone, yet stood firm. Searching for hope, he traveled to Taif, thinking they might accept Islam. But instead, the people of Taif rejected him cruelly. Children lined the streets throwing stones. His sandals filled with blood. Angels descended offering to crush the people between the mountains. But he said, "No, perhaps their children will believe." Such was his mercy, even at the worst moment of his life. He returned to Makkah wounded, but not broken. And then came the gift, Isra wal Miraj, a heavenly journey that took him from Makkah to Jerusalem, and then to the heavens. There he met the previous prophets, saw the wonders of paradise and the torments of hell, and was gifted the 5 daily prayers. This miracle was a sign to him that no matter how painful the earth had become, Allah was with him above the skies. More people began to believe. Delegations from Yathrib, later to be called Medina, came to Makkah secretly during Hajj. They pledged allegiance to the Prophet and invited him to their city. And finally, after years of struggle, Allah gave the command, "Leave Makkah, migrate to Medina." Thus began the Hijrah, not a flight of fear, but a march of purpose. The camel ride of prophecy had begun. The story of Islam was no longer a whisper. In the valleys of Quraysh, it was now a voice that would echo across the world.